welcome to Lift Up Your Hearts podcast. This is a podcast where I pray into a microphone to show that it's possible to have a deep and real prayer life. And I want to come on today before the New Year's and give you my 4 tips, just 4, maybe a consolation tip, to pray better this year. If you're like me, you like New Year's resolutions. I don't know. A lot of people maybe have given up on them. I certainly haven't. But if you're, my favorite quote is from Socrates, "The unexamined life is not worth living." And if you want to examine your life this year, then you might be into New Year's resolutions. And if you want to pray more this year, I hear that from some people, I'd like to get connected to God. I'd like to go to church more. I'd like to pray more. I just have 4 tips on how to do it, or just how to get started. Okay, I'm going to dive right into them. The first one is pray with the Sunday Gospels. This is one way that I got started with it, and I think it's great because these are the readings that the church picks out for us in her wisdom. And if you're going to go through multi-years of this, you're going to get all the Gospels. And I just think it's beautiful to walk with the church as she walks through the life and the year that we have. So if you're going to start praying this year, I suggest, first of all, starting with the Sunday Gospels. And you can do any style of prayer, but I would suggest the style that I use. So you can watch this podcast as one of your resolutions to kind of get you started there. So tiny bit of a self-promotion, but the reason I do this podcast is because that's how I got started anyways. So that's number 1, pray with the Sunday Gospels. Number 2, just pray with the Gospels. I would suggest, like I did last time, starting, if you're going to do a contemplative style, to start with the Gospel of St. Luke. It's got all the canticles and has a lot of beautiful, I just think it's well written. And for me, it lends itself more to doing a contemporary contemplative style of prayer. It allows me to dive into the story better. And other Gospels might do that for you. I know a lot of people that start with Matthew because it's at the beginning, or they start with Luke or Mark because it's the shortest, or they start with John because it's their favorite. You can start with whichever one you want. I would suggest, if you're going to do a contemplative style, then to start with the Gospel of Luke. Okay, so that's number 2. Number 1, read the Sunday Gospels. Number 2, read through the beginning to end of one of the Gospels. You're just going to get a breadth and a depth that is possibly going to come to life for you a little bit more. And this certainly happened to me. I had a job where I was really bored, and I didn't have a ton of immediate responsibility. I had to watch something. I had to watch sewage bypass pumps. Super awesome. Gross. But I had an opportunity to read a lot. And I read through the Bible, and it came alive for me more than it ever had before, because I wasn't just picking and choosing little pieces and jumping around. I went through the whole thing. I think a lot of people experience that same thing, or that same experience when they did the Bible in a year this year, or the last 2 or 3 years, or whatever. So read through one of the Gospels. You can't go wrong. And then third is find a book. So number 3, find a book about prayer that you can learn more about how other people do it. There is Peter Kraft has a book, Prayer for Beginners, I think it's called. St. Francis de Sales has a number of books. The Introduction to the Devout Life. I would suggest anything from Father Timothy Gallagher. If you want to learn more about how to do this style of prayer, I would suggest Meditation and Contemplation by Father Timothy Gallagher. He walks through how to do this style of prayer. If you want to just be more examining of your own life and intentional about your life, I would suggest the Examine Prayer. The Examine Prayer by Father Timothy Gallagher, of course. But he's really bringing to fruition the style of St. Ignatius and how he taught people to pray at the end of the day. And it's not really like an examination of conscience, because the first step is to be grateful. The first step of the Examine Prayer is to be grateful. You go through your whole day and recognize the blessings that God has poured down upon you and to be grateful for it. I found a lot of fruit from that. Just going through my day and being grateful of all the little stuff. Lord, thank you for water. Thank you for having clean tap water that I can drink. Thank you for having food. Thank you for my job. Thank you for the opportunity to teach people. Thank you for warm house. Thank you for clothing. All these things we take for granted are really a blessing, really an amazing blessing. And then also some of the more profound things, okay? So number 1, read through the Gospels, or read through the Sunday Gospel. Number 2, pray with a gospel from beginning to end. Number 3, read a book about prayer. And then number 4, and this might be the most important for a New Year's resolution, is to pick a time to pray. If you don't pray at some time, you're not going to pray at any time. Some wise saint said that, I'm sure. I want to attribute it to Mother Teresa, but I'm sure someone else said it, or she took it from someone. It doesn't really matter because it's true. And I found it true for me as well. If I don't pick a time that I'm going to pray, it's not something I have extra time for. I have to be intentional with my prayer. And if I don't pick a time, it's probably not happening. It's probably just not going to happen. And the same is probably true with you. And if you didn't follow through with your New Year's resolutions from last year, it might have been because you weren't intentional about how you're actually going to fulfill them this year, or how you were going to fulfill them last year. And that's a really big thing. And of course, just don't beat yourself up, okay? So number 1, pray through the Sunday Gospels. Number 2, pray from beginning to end with an entire gospel. Number 3, find a book about prayer. I suggest Father Timothy Gallagher, St. Francis de Sales, Peter Kraft, any of those. Highly recommend. They've been very helpful for me. And then number 4, you got to find a time and a place and how you're actually going to do it to make it happen. And then a consolation one, and this is probably horrible calling it a consolation, but maybe you just start praying the rosary and meditating on that and going through the life of Christ through the rosary. I don't know. Maybe you could do that as well. So that's number 5, really, but a consolation one. One of the big ones I'm going to do, and I've found a lot of fruit from it in the last couple months, is just praying through the daily Mass and going through that, and then also reintroducing the Examine Prayer, and then journaling. So I used to do all of those things, and some of them kind of slipped and fell or didn't happen for a little while. And so for me to really do that again, it would be really beneficial for my own prayer. So if you found other things that have been helpful for you to get started, or you know other things that have helped others, please put them in the comments below. Like this button, subscribe to this channel if you want to see more of this content. I really try to help people pray. I really try to help people introduce prayer to their life, because I know how powerful it can be and how life-changing it can be. So I hope you have a wonderful New Year's. I'll be praying for you. Please pray for me. God bless.